It's week 4, and the top 4 players have completely changed. Welcome to the week 4 weekly data ranking analysis. So, starting off here, the top 24 weekly, these are your weekly carries. Shea and Jalen Williams, they're up the top through a 4-game week and some really good play. I think a combination of the fact that they played all their games and a lot of the other stars, like Jokic, did not play as much and weren't able to get there. So they had a really strong week. The next one I want to talk about is Giannis. And Giannis normally gets penalized pretty hard here because he misses his free throws, doesn't shoot many threes, and that tanks a Z score rating. However, Giannis hit a lot of his free throws this week, including a game where I think he went 16 of 17 from the line. And with a massive scoring game as well, I think 59 points, he was able to get 8th this week. That's where we want him. And I think bonus points, because that's 8th with the Z score penalty. Giannis right there, a stud this season. Fantastic. Anthony Edwards is the next one I want to talk about. He came in 11th, which is about where some people were drafting him, but he's had a couple of really strong games, and I think it's maybe concerning that with some of those other top players out, Ant was only able to get in at 11th for the week, and so I wonder next week if he doesn't keep up a super high level of production and the other strong players come back, then I think Ant will actually push down out of the carries. Quick honourable mention to De'Aaron Fox and Wemby, who had really high scoring games. I think Fox scored like crazy, and Wemby had a 50 piece to round out the top 10 there. Moving on to the top 24 ranking jump players. So these are your streamers. The first one, Malik Beasley for Detroit. He's been sharing a lot of time with Tim Hardaway Jr. and they've both been a little bit streaky, but with Tim Hardaway out, Malik Beasley's been playing a lot of minutes and getting a lot of threes and has been putting up really good streamer value. Patrick Williams, the next one, he's been a fringe 12-team player, but he's been putting up really strong numbers as Chicago play more up-tempo offense, and he's actually shooting the ball and getting it in, and that always helps. Jared McCain, the next one from Philly, he's playing a lot of minutes with Tyrese Maxey out, but not only that, he's shooting a lot and he's getting them in. He's been the best offensive player for Philly for maybe the last 3 games, which is why you see him on this list. If you are able to pick him up, he's giving you really good value, but obviously that's an injury replacement guy, and when Max is back, he'll probably fall off a little bit. And down the bottom, Dalton Connect. He's actually played really well, and I think the Lakers had a couple of starters out, so he is just an injury replacement guy. But even when they come back, because he's shown that he can shoot and get a lot of points and threes, I think he will still have a role on the Lakers and might be a fringe kind of streamer on 3-pointers, or definitely an injury replacement guy moving forward. To the next one, these are the top 24 ranking jumps players. These are your matchup winners or sell high potential. What it's saying is that they've greatly performed at ADP this week, so they are hot players. Consider selling high. Obviously, there's a little bit more context around that if they're constantly on this list. Then maybe they're not a sell high and they're actually going to be that good this season. But for a lot of them, they probably helped you win your matchup, and yeah, consider that sell high candidate. First, I want to point to the data as well. It's looking really strong again this week. 15 of the players in this list were on a winning roster, and I think this is how I expect the data to be, maybe even a little bit more balanced. But of course, there are going to be some good players that just happen to be on a bad team, and then a couple that weren't rostered, which were surprises or mistakes. And they're the ones that I'm going to focus on today. They're the ones with the little blue icon and with the stars. Amen Thompson, he was a surprise, I think. He played a couple more minutes, got really good defensive stats. He's been that fringe kind of guy, but this week it was surprising and he played really well. So yeah, that's good to see here. Now, Jakob Poeltl, he wasn't started by myself. I will own up to that was my poor decision. I was trying to do something with categories, trying to go for more assists and go away from the rebounds and blocks because I thought I would lose that anyway. But he had a monster week. He scored, I think, 35 one game, 25 another on really good percentages. Yeah, he's up here, and that was a mistake. Thompson was a surprise, but not starting Jakob Poeltl was a mistake by me. The next one, Brook Lopez. Now, I think that was a mistake because if you knew that Lillard was going to be out, I think he was day to day or had a concussion. Brook Lopez filled that usage from Lillard, and that's why he was able to get a lot of value here. I think he got some blocks as usual, but really got a lot of points and threes more than he normally would, and that's allowed him to shoot up the rankings a bit. And then finally, Denny Advia, I think he is a surprise. He's been borderline in Portland, potentially droppable. He's moved around to the bench and everything. But this week, he was surprising. He was good. He got the 73rd best player, which again, it's not crazy, but it's enough of a jump to be on that matchup winners list. Moving to the top 24 just right players, we'll talk about the top players that have really spot on their ADP from this week's performance. So Devin Booker. Now, I want to be concerned with Devin Booker because he hit his ADP, but Kevin Durant's been out. Bradley Beal's been out for a couple of games. Devin Booker's got all the usage in the world, and he had a couple of really strong games, and still with that, he was only able to hit his ADP of 19. I think a little bit concerning from Booker, and I wonder when all the other guys come back and he gets just a little bit less usage, he'll probably sit below his ADP, which is not good for value. Anthony Edwards next. I think he's in a similar boat. Edwards had a really strong week and was still only able to be around his ADP, being 2 off. And I think that's again concerning. If Edwards has a midweek or a little bit down, then yeah, he pushes down. And you've got to remember as well that Ant Edwards is at 11 because people like Jokic aren't there, because some of the other injured players aren't there. I think he's one to watch as well. He's just right this week, but maybe other weeks he'll fall out. Colin Sexton and Zach Edey, they were both about the 90s, and that's where they were this week. I think Sexton had a couple of pretty bad weeks where he was out of the rotation, but he came back in and played, and yeah, got that 90th value which we were hoping for, but people probably dropped him. And Zach Edey as well. He had a really strong week in there. He's had a really poor week, and now he's sitting about where he is. But remember, Memphis have a lot of people out, and as they keep coming back, I don't expect Zach Edey to sit at 90 if he loses usage. The weekly injury list that we've got here, there's a lot to talk about on this one. So first of all, the full 24 players here are fantasy relevant, in my opinion. The last couple of weeks, it's been maybe 12 or 15 players, but here 24 people that I think are fantasy relevant were injured this week and did not play at all. So the two that I want to point out are Nikola Jokic and Damian Lillard. Jokic only played 2 games, and he was day-to-day for both of them and had personal reasons. So he's going to be fine. But because he was day-to-day, people would have started him and then actually got no production. So it's not great, but yeah, obviously he'll recover and he's a very good player. And then Damian Lillard, I believe he had a concussion and was again day to day. So if you started Lillard, that probably hurt you. Now, the matchup loses. I want to point straight away down to the bottom. The data's looking good. 12 of the players here were on a losing team. 8 of the players were not owned or started because either we knew they were going to have a bad week or because they shouldn't be rostered at all. They had a high ADP, but they don't need to be anywhere near us at the moment. 4 players there were on winning teams. And I want to talk about those 4 players were actually in the bottom third of this, being Miller, DiVincenzo, DeRozan, and Jrue Holiday. I'm really happy with how this looks in total. And I think this metric for a matchup loser in a weekly league is pretty spot on so far into the season. The 3 I want to talk about, Anthony Simons, he got injured midweek. You get injured midweek and then don't play. It's pretty rough to recover from that. The next one, John Kuminga on the Warriors. It's really hard to fit in. There's a lot happening, and they only played 2 games. Again, this one is schedule dependent as well. 2 games as a fringe player is really hard to produce from there. And then finally, Joel Embiid. He returned, but it was a 3-game week with a back-to-back. So Embiid only played 2 games, and in those 2 games, he did not look like an MVP candidate. So with medium production in 2 games, he was 182nd on the week, and that's not good enough to cut it in a 12-team weekly league. But you can see Joel Embiid, the manager, expected him to be bad with that back-to-back and sat him out. But obviously that's not good if you are having to sit Joel Embiid out when he is healthy and playing. Yeah, a little bit concerning, and it'll be interesting to see how Embiid goes, and hopefully he can stay off this list. Moving on to the low game heroes. So these are the players that have played 2 games, but were able to crack the 120. There were 5 players this week, and last week I projected Curry, Jokic, and maybe Embiid and Paul George if they sat out. Curry made it, and Paul George made it. Perfect as expected. Jokic didn't play at all, and then Embiid wasn't actually producing good enough to make the cut. Interestingly, Jamal Murray was on that 2-game Denver, and he did make it. And Draymond Green as well on the 2-game Warriors was able to make it. So this is a pretty good metric, and I think maybe not only those really star players, but maybe those kind of middle tier players can actually produce. Looking at the average games played per week, which is the average amount of games per team, last week was 3.40, and this week it's 3.13. So that means that overall there's less games being played. So it's actually a little bit easier for those 2-game players. Not only that, there's actually 4 teams playing 2 games, so there'll be more players to score within that top 120. I'm projecting about 6 to 8 players, which is 2 players on each of those 2-game teams, but it'll be interesting to see if even more players are able to achieve that. And that's it for the week. Please comment feedback, subscribe for more weekly analysis, and yeah, season per game averages coming later, and then full 120 ranking coming up later this week. And I think that'll be interesting because Jokic didn't play. He was on top, but he's going to fall down a little bit. So stay tuned to see how far he falls. Thanks everyone for watching.